Hey everybody, this is Stephanie asking you to hear me out. So today we're talking with Steve Rose, but before I get into that, I just want to let you know that we might say some things in this video that might trigger you. If we do, please reach out to your supports. It's super important. My friends at Aegis Health Group and I believe that in order to dispel the stigma, we have to talk about it. We're also all about creating safe spaces for those going through the recovery journey, and that's what we're trying to do here. So let's get to it. Hey Steve, how's it going?
Good, yourself?
Not too bad. Thank you for coming out and doing this with me. I know you're probably a really busy guy right about now.
Right, yeah, no problem.
So I know you don't really have a background in addiction, but you kind of found your way into that area of expertise. So do you want to talk a little bit about that with me?
Yeah, so I had no personal experience with having an addiction. I actually started as an academic sociologist, teaching sociology at Eastern Michigan University. And really I wanted to kind of move into where I was going to be working with people rather than just teaching and rather than just doing research and writing. And I really wanted to work with people one-on-one. My background is veterans research, looking at suicide among veterans in transition. And so I really had a lot of mental health experience in the literature, but I wanted to find a way to apply it. So I got a summer job doing problem gambling prevention. From there, did the chemical dependency certificate at St. Clair College, started working in withdrawal management, and I'm currently at Problem Gambling, Center for Problem Gambling and Digital Dependency, as well as doing private practice in addiction counseling.
Excellent, excellent. We definitely need a few more addiction counselors the way the city looks today, I guess. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with problem gambling and how that related to what you were doing with the veteran research?
Well, they're two kind of separate things in a way. I kind of fell into the field on accident, needing employment throughout the summer, and then realized I really loved the field of addictions. I liked the approaches, the motivational interviewing style. I really just was drawn to it and developed a really strong passion through my work in problem gambling. And from there, just became almost obsessed with it and really took it quite a bit further.
Okay, I'm really surprised that you didn't find the similarities with a veteran that's coming back from a war-torn situation, having that mental illness, because mental illness is kind of one of the backings for addiction. So I'm wondering how does that apply?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I see is the social component, being a sociologist by trade. The social context is everything, and one of our most fundamental human needs is to feel like we belong. If we don't feel like we belong, we have the fight or flight instincts kick in, because literally before the modern era, if you think back in our evolution, if we didn't belong to a tribe or a group, we were at severe danger and at risk of being killed by a predator. So this is inborn in us through our evolution of needing people, needing support, and community is really how we evolved as a species. But if we don't have that, we have this fight or flight, and that's where the mental illness piece comes in. In terms of a lot of our anxiety revolves around whether or not we feel like we fit in, and that the stigma piece, we can maybe talk about that as well. So, and in both gambling as well as veterans, people feel isolated, they try to medicate it with something. Mm-hmm. And veterans transitioning to civilian life feel isolated because look what they were doing. They were part of units and teams with a mission, come back and they feel like, now what am I supposed to do? No purpose. The people that we're surrounded by they've gone their own ways. So they feel isolated. That's a terrible combination.
Absolutely.
Purposelessness, isolation, and then you get mental health issues, as well as you can potentially have self-medicating through either substances, but gambling is just another way to do the same thing. Escapism through slot machines is one of the most common things. And it's not and people always think, is it because they're just greedy, these greedy gamblers, they just want more money, it's never enough for them. But really, it's what you're talking about is that mental health that's behind it, that's driving this need for escapism, and it's really not about the money often.
So when you're talking about problem gambling, it seems like people can go in just right away and there's an immediate action that they can take right off the hop.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it's really integrated into the space where when somebody wants to get out of there and do something that's different and change something, they can go right to us in the casino, and there's no gap. It's immediately off the slot machine, self-exclude, and then we can talk to them about getting into treatment from there. So it is a really nice, smooth transition. Now the lapse would be in waiting for treatment, and that would be where the wait times come in.
But they've already self-excluded, so they
Right.
don't have to worry about that temptation because they can't go into the casino even if they wanted to.
Right.
This is something I'd love to see in the world of addiction when it comes to like substance use, because we don't have anything like that. There's no immediate response that we can take. Now I know you've done a little bit of work with detox as well.
Right. Yeah, so I worked in with withdrawal for about 6 months, brief time, but a very intense time. And it was a huge learning experience working in there.
And
Really,
now-
really meaningful work.
How do you find that the two processes differ from working to gambling, problem gambling to detox?
Well, problem gambling was prevention focus as well as referral. But detox, very different. It's people coming off of harsh substances, withdrawals. They're really physically in a bad space often, very sick, and it's kind of residential. It's residential programming. They're there for a few days, and you're kind of working with them to do referrals to treatment in this kind of longer time frame when they're well enough to really discuss where they're looking to go.
And do you feel that there's an immediate response that you guys can take? Is there anything that you're able to give these people as an immediate response to how to like manage the triggers until they're getting into those rehab centers?
Sometimes. Now, there's not a lot of time to really work with people in that environment. Sometimes there is, and we can have good conversations, and I've had a few of those. But it's often so busy due to lack of perhaps funding. And they're doing a better job these days. It's changed a lot from the past, but it's still there's quite a bit of pressure in that environment to work at a pace that doesn't necessarily allow you to have that one-on-one that you'd hopefully like to have, because there's the phones are ringing, and as you said, you want somebody to get into withdrawal. Into the program as fast as possible. You don't want that wait time. And it's a balance between us bringing as many people in as we could with really slowing things down and having those one-on-one conversations. So there was always a balance. You'd have to balance those two situations. But mainly those conversations, the coping skills would happen in more of a treatment environment.
So it's something maybe that they can add to detox eventually, hopefully.
And they're already doing it, but the more staff and the more support that they can have, the better it could be, of course. And everyone's doing their best, and they're doing great work. It's just the more funding, the more personnel, the better people can be supported in the process of withdrawing and then recovery, and hopefully making it to a treatment center.
And so you've taken some of the stuff that you've learned from obviously detox and problem gambling and brought it into your own counseling service, right?
Right, and a lot of that is how to build rapport with people. As an academic, you are in a very strange place where people communicate very rationally, and it's all about the information. You have to give them the information, you have to teach the information, what are the facts. Now, what happens if you do that in a treatment environment? If I were to approach you and say, this is the information you need to know, and I started lecturing you on that.
Stop listening.
To stop listening. Exactly. So it's transitioning the communication style into not trying to teach people how to be. Because nobody wants to be lectured to, nobody wants to be told what to do. Now that's where the motivational interviewing comes in, and that's the approach I largely learned in problem gambling prevention, because you're speaking with people who are still gambling. And it's really this flexible approach where you're doing a lot more listening, a lot less talking. You're never telling, you're always guiding, asking them what they want, how they can get there. So it's really a guiding kind of communication style that was the big transition for me in going into this field.
And you're coming at it kind of from a harm reduction standpoint at the same time, it sounds like. Now, do you do this in your own practice as well, where if you have people that are in addiction and are still using, is this a requirement that, you can't be using to come into my office, or do you take people still using?
I would speak to anyone who wants to recover and is willing. I am open to any individual, and it's just that motivation, it has to be there. And how do you motivate someone is the biggest part of addiction counseling. Because if you're dealing with pure mental health, they're highly motivated. Somebody with anxiety, they want that result. They're like, I can't live with this anxiety. Now with addiction, you have that motivation seesaw where it's like, well, I kind of want to stop, but I really want to stop, but I really want to use. And there's the motivation's kind of split in both of those directions. And as we talked about for you, it was like that need-hate relationship where you hated it, but your motivation was to do it, but you were motivated to stop at the same time. So you're really working almost with this inner negotiation with that person who's having a negotiation on the inside. So the last thing you want to do is try to strong-arm them, because they're already doing it in their own mind. And all you're doing is adding more fuel to the mental war, the inner battle that they're already having.
So you're basically just kind of walking through it with them rather than doing it for them or giving them the path. You're just kind of walking them through it.
And being that stable support that they can trust, and that's a huge thing with addictions, as you know. The lack of trust, complete lack of trust, and working in withdrawal, I think that was the biggest thing that's the first thing I focused on. I mentioned it to you before, that the beginning of each shift, my goal was to at least meet every person and to get a kind of baseline rapport and build the trust. Because if you don't have the trust of the people you're working with, you have nothing. You can't do anything. So really building that trust through being genuine, not feeling like you need to change them or tell them what to do or be the authority that's going to crack down if they are not doing something right. Having them trust that they can come to you is another thing, and that's huge with addictions.
And do you find that was a little bit harder to do coming from a professional background? Because I know a lot of the times when I was going through my addiction, I would speak to a professional, and within 5 minutes, I could not talk to this person. This person does not understand and will not get it. But when I spoke to somebody, instantly I knew either this person had experience with it or they'd been through it themselves, but they knew where I was coming from. Do you find that with your work?
For me, the style was natural. Before going into the field, I tended to have more of this collaborative communication style. So it was something that I'd already been doing. Academia will train you out of it to some degree, and you'll start debating people on petty little facts and like, no, this does. So despite my academic training, I still had that kind of approach naturally in me, which was really amplified through the training around motivational interviewing and the experiences working with people in withdrawal. And really you have to be careful, because if you had all come across as like the professional who knows, like that's you're done. You don't necessarily get a second chance.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's been counselors I've walked out of their offices and never called back for that second appointment just because of the way that they talked to me in the first place. I kind of felt like I was in a college class being talked to by a professor rather than somebody who was supposed to help me.
Right, yeah.
What's something now that you'd like to say to anybody out here who might be watching these videos, if they're looking for help or if they want to get help or something, just what would you say to them?
I would say reach out. It's difficult to find the right person to reach out to, because as you said, you might reach out to somewhere and then you get the lecture situation happening and you're like, wait a minute, I don't like help. This is not for me. Then you go back to what you know. So it's being aware that not necessarily the first time you reach out, you might not get the right help. You might encounter someone who's burnt out, maybe a lack of training, experience, whatever it is, that you would be persistent to try somewhere else, to try again. one way to kind of minimize the risk of encountering that situation would be looking at who has already been through treatment, who has already reached out that you know and that you can trust, and where did they go? Who did they talk to? What was their experience? And in reaching out to your network of what did you do and how did you find this person, this organization, and then once you find one that sounds pretty good, to reach out to that organization. And if it doesn't work for you, try another. And it's that persistence in finding the right person, I think, is huge.
Yeah.
And not giving up.
I know we talked about stigma before, but I do want to kind of touch on that today because, yes, there's many different programs out there, but some of the programs themselves can be stigmatizing to the people that are going through them. They're not feeling like they're getting help. What do you find, what do you do in your practice to make sure that stigma is not, that you're being aware of that, or you're being aware of other programs? Because I'm sure you have people that come in and have horror stories from other programs. So how do you navigate that with them?
Well, it's really the interpersonal style. It's really what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. It's having a normal, genuine, collaborative conversation, and not discounting their previous experiences and listening to what that might be, and saying, well, this is how we might do things differently here. So navigating stigma personally, it's really in how you interact with that person. And I know, as you said, stigma kept you from getting help. Mm-hmm. That was
a huge one.
And I'm more curious about your experiences, because personally I don't have a lot of experience confronting stigma, but I know you have a lot of that. What were some of the thoughts going on that you had with stigma? I'm curious.
Just with different programming that I went into, the people that I was dealing with, you could tell that they had no experience with addiction, and that they, in their mind, their personal opinion of the person sitting across the desk from them, this is just another person who uses drugs. I'll have 10 of them in my office tomorrow, and you can really sense that when you're going into offices and talking to these people. Doctors, like my own family doctor, I went and I asked him for help, and instead of directing me to a place for help, he basically told me I wasn't allowed to have narcotics anymore. Well, that's a huge help, doc. But I
slap on the wrist, no more.
Right, there was no referral to a program. There was no the only referral you get in the city is to go to detox, go to withdrawal management, and they'll send you on your way. When it comes to police coming in to help, I had very, very, very many bad experiences with police coming in because, oh, well, this person has an addiction charge, or they're with somebody who we picked up for addictions. And I see a lot of that stigma coming through from those, kind of like from the first responders. Now, I know it's not their personal thing. I think it's more of a frustration that comes from having to deal with the same people over again and see the same things over again. Yeah. But at the same time, it's just they need to learn how to navigate that so that you're not sending people away for help. I had been trained to be so scared of asking for help from people because of the way I'd been treated that it took me a very long time to finally get to my wits end and just say, okay, enough is enough. I need help and I need it now. And I didn't know when I was walking into Aegis, I had no idea what that response was going to be like. I didn't know if this was going to be another doctor that was going to talk to me like my own family doctor did, or if it was going to be another counselor that had absolutely no idea what I was going through. Right. And I ended up walking into a place where they understood it probably better than I did. So,
and it was almost luck that you found the right kind of place.
It's funny because they were helping my ex, or at least they were trying to help my ex. He didn't stick with the program. It wasn't his program, but it worked out for me, and that it was him saying, "Hey, go here." That was how I ended up walking in the door of them and realizing that there was a place that was going to help people.
And what you found was different, more so for you, was like the lack of stigma.
Mm-hmm. I felt like I was a human when I walked into their building. I didn't feel like I was walking into an addiction doctor office. There wasn't like posters on the wall like "Don't do drugs." Like it was actually a nice place. And some of the places that I've been to before for counseling, they're like, drugs are bad, okay, on the walls and stuff. And it's a lot about the atmosphere, not just necessarily the people, but the atmosphere that you're walking into. When you feel like you're walking into a place that's going to treat you like a human, you're already kind of half expecting it. When you walk into a place and you look around and you feel like you're not going to get treated like a human, you're already expecting it.
Exactly. So the environment, the aesthetic feel, the decor, I mean, that's a piece of it. Mm-hmm. But then the humans behind the counter. That's another.
They were amazing, and all of them are friends to this day. Like I stop in and say hi all the time, especially because I tend to do a little bit of work with them.
Right,
so
right.
It's a nice place, and I feel like I'm part of the group. I'm not just the token substance user that they ask questions to or something like that. Yeah. And there's been positions that I felt like that in too, where it's like, oh, you used to use drugs and we want to pick your brain. Tell me more, and it's not really going anywhere. It's not really doing anything. It's not for a reason.
Yeah. So the counselor's not experienced in addiction, and they're like, oh wow, tell me about meth. And like all these like.
Yes, and you'd be surprised at some of the professionals that are working in this field, because they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know how to approach people like us. Like you said, we have trust issues. We are afraid of our own shadows in most cases.
Right.
So having somebody that kind of talked to me in a calm, cool, like, okay, I get what you're going through. Yeah. How do you want to proceed with this? This is your options. Like, they were very informative. And that's why I say at the end of all of my videos that if you know somebody who's looking for help, then you need to get in touch with Aegis Health Group. 226-946-100, and we'll mention that again at the end of the video. So what are your plans for the future now? Are you just going to do the private practice, or are you looking to do something bigger?
Yeah, so I'm still employed in the problem gambling field, growing the private practice. I started it actually in February.
So just before COVID. You poor man.
would have never thought that,
No.
Signing a year lease in an office space in February was probably a bad idea. Who could have predicted? So as I was starting to ramp up, it kind of went off the cliff, and now I'm picking it back up now as people are more comfortable to go into spaces, and I'm really starting to build it. So going forward with that.
Then did you have an online option, or is that something that you're doing?
Yeah, so I do online with people. I find there's no real barrier online. In terms of the research, I did a lot of research looking at, is online as effective as in person, and wrote an article on this, and it's actually shown to be comparable in terms of its effectiveness. The only thing I personally notice is sometimes you get a lag in the communication, so it's like, oh no, you go ahead, and you get a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the effectiveness of the collaboration and working with someone online, I haven't found that to be a real barrier for me.
Awesome. So hopefully we'll see you again, and we'll talk to you again on the show. I want to thank you very much for coming out and doing this with me today. I know it's, like I said, you're a busy guy. You're starting all these new things, so I can imagine, and new baby. So
yes, thank you. Yes.
Congratulations again.
Yes.
So I just want to let you know, if you do know somebody who's looking for help, please call Aegis. At least start there. It might not be the program for you, but at least give it a try. And the number is 226-946-1000. All right, well, everybody, thank you for joining me this week, and we'll see you again in the next video.